Hey guys, Zibboyeye or just Zib is fine, and welcome to my Q&A. But before that, I'll give a short story of behind the scenes trouble. The weekend after I posted my Q&A announcement, my laptop died. Why? Well, I don't know. I did a BIOS update and it wouldn't turn on after. A technician said that it was something up with the motherboard and that it could take 3 weeks and up to $300 to fix. So I thought it was too much to go for too long without a computer, which is why I bought a new one. Afterwards, I dissected my old laptop for its hard drive, an intimidating feat I somehow managed to overcome. But now it's pretty much an external drive from which I salvaged all my data. But one problem, my scripts weren't on the computer's hard drive, they were on its solid state drive. Meaning my Rec vs. Quarantine file is still on there. But thankfully, that is not the only copy. Right before I updated my BIOS, I got a sense of trepidation. So just before I updated, I uploaded the recently completed script to a private Discord server. Meaning I was able to download it, print it, and perform it all before I got a new laptop. So I am very thankful to this sort of premonition I had. My review's production went off hardly hindered and it's coming right on schedule, so expect Rec vs. Quarantine in August. But now for the Q&A. The first 2 questions comes from Zax, who asks, do you enjoy Resident Evil and which entries are your favorite? Honestly, I was pretty surprised at how perfect the first question this was. I love Resident Evil, it is one of my favorite series ever. I have almost every game on PS4 including the PS2 download for Code Veronica, and I even have some of the PlayStation classics. I own the animes and I even own the hexology of the kinda shameful American film series. So yes, I really enjoy Resident Evil. As for which are my favorite, I have to say it's between the original remake and Remake 2. I love when the series is about survival horror rather than action, and I also just love the classic tank controls and fixed camera angles of the series. And the pre-rendered backgrounds of Remake 1 are beautiful, they are peak of the series. And I started out with the remake, so it holds a special place in my heart for hooking me into the series. After 7 brought the series back to survival horror, I was really happy to see 2 continue that trend. It takes a few liberties to be its own thing while recreating every memorable moment from the original. I feel I have to acknowledge the more actiony side of the series, and for that my favorites are Resident Evil Remake 3 and Resident Evil Revelations 2. Although admittingly, Resident Evil 3 Remake doesn't recreate much of what I loved about the original. But no matter what, I still love the games and the series. The next questions are from Grande's Graveyard, who asks, why do you prefer Rasen over Ringu 2? And what is the horror film that scares you the most? Now, I understand why people would like Ringu 2 more than Rasen. Its horror is more similar to the original, it features the return of the original director, and it features the return of Reiko and Yoshie. I can understand that that might turn people off of Rasen, that those 2 characters were killed off. I think it's because of Ringu and Rasen's coupled production that those 2 couldn't film another film since they were already filming Ringu. So it's a bit of a shame that didn't work out in Rasen's favor. But I really like Rasen. Although it is more science fiction horror than supernatural horror, I think they weave the science fiction elements well into Sadako's curse. I also think that the more sciencey approach is appropriate considering the technophobic themes of the series. And given the reveal of Sadako's plan by the end, I think that it gives Sadako a much more fleshed out character and makes her a very intimidating villain, much more than in Ringu 2. Not to spoil the ending of Rasen, but the plan ends up impacting the world on a global scale. So it elevates the conflict a step up from the original. So essentially it's for all those reasons why I prefer Rasen over Ringu 2. As for the second question, the film that scares me the most is Koji Shiraishi's Noroi, The Curse. It's a found footage movie which I kind of went through a phase last year in October and December, spurred by Rec actually. In a few of the Shiraishi films I've seen, it often plays a scene out and then slows it down to show something you missed. And it gives me a sense of paranoia since, well, if I didn't notice that, what's going on here that I won't notice? Not only that, but the film imitates some different shows in Japan. It even takes some real-life names and people. So the film, especially for Japanese audiences, convinces you of its realism. Not only that, but the film has some pretty twisted visuals, especially by the end, that are etched into my mind. It's also a good mystery, so as you're delving further into the truth, you're delving further into the horror. Noroi is one of my favorite films ever, and one of the scariest I've seen. So, next one by Eversong Woods. The first question is, I remember you mentioning Dead by Daylight helping your channel's views when the Sadako chapter was released. Have you played Dead by Daylight? If so, what do you think about Sadako's game design in terms of her abilities in the game? I have never played Dead by Daylight, so I haven't gotten a chance to play as Sadako. But I didn't want to leave it at that, so I watched a bit of gameplay of Sadako in Dead by Daylight. And I also tried looking into Sadako's abilities on the Dead by Daylight wiki, and I had no idea the game was as complex as it was. At least I had a hard time understanding what the abilities meant for the game players, but, that could just be because I haven't played the game. But I agree with you that I think her abilities are very unique for the game because, from what I understand, most of the game's characters or killers are slasher villains. They are characters associated very much with physical offense, which I think makes the psychic Sadako stand out. And I just think she looks awesome. Her model is great, and her little TV staticky effects is a great touch. The TV static effects might be inspired by Samara, so that's a cool detail. Also, kudos for incorporating her most iconic moment coming through the TV into the gameplay. She can teleport through TVs, which I'm a little surprised that they incorporated. Because that meant the level designs aren't static, they had to implement little TV locations around the level if you play as Sadako. At least I'm pretty sure, because I don't know if any of the other characters can teleport like that. But either way, I think her inclusion and powers are very cool. Also, I was very surprised that they included an adult Yoshie in the game. It made me feel like they really cared about the series since they invented this older version of the character. And given the fact that he has ESP too, I think him and Sadako standing off is a great idea. So overall, I think the Ringu chapter in Dead by Daylight is pretty cool. The next question from Zel Homenim asks, have you seen season 1 and 2 of the Scream TV show? If yes, how would you rate the concept of Ghostface? Is he much worse than the original Ghostface, or do you like the idea of him? And, well, I just decided to change pace. I'll answer your next question when I get to it. I have not seen the Scream TV show, but I do own the first 3 Scream movies. But I will try to answer your question to the best I can. The idea that Ghostface is different is actually pretty intriguing, especially since, from what I know of this series, it's a different killer each movie. That's not spoilers, I don't know about the series, so it could be, it could not be. Although I don't know how the series adapts this character, I do like the idea that they change it up. In concept, I think it takes advantage of who the new Ghostface can be. And the reason I say that is because I kinda wish they did that with the Saw series. And I should watch the Scream movies soon enough, especially considering their impact on the horror genre. And your next question is about the Evil Dead game. Have you played it, seen it, and if yes, what is your opinion about this game? I haven't played it, but one of the streamers I watched played it and I found it interesting. It's part of the trend of these asymmetrical multiplayer horror games. And I think it's doing a lot right that the Friday the 13th game didn't. Although big props to the indie team that made the Friday the 13th game. The Evil Dead game has a story mode, which I think is a great way to introduce players into the gameplay mechanics. Also, from what I understand, Evil Dead has to do a lot with time travel later in the series, so I think that opens itself up to quite a few levels to be introduced through DLC or later however on. Also, the Friday the 13th game was a little bit unfortunate because it ended up going against Dead by Daylight. Why would I play as just Jason when I can play as this multitude of other horror characters? But the Evil Dead game doesn't seem to have that problem since, from what I understand, the heroes are more famous than the villains. So I think it has that unique draw to distinguish itself from Dead by Daylight. So I hope the Evil Dead game is a success and continues to be loved by fans. The next question is by Oscarito, a friend of mine. He asked, if you have one, what would you say is your favorite movie you've seen? What is your least favorite? I'll start with the worst movie first cause I want to end things on a more positive note. As for my least favorite, definitely Kirk Cameron Saves Christmas, which I ended up forcing a group of people to watch. But I suffered through it too, so don't worry. Here's a big belief on my views towards movies. A movie that is poorly made, poorly written, and is just overall bad, but has a good message, is better than a movie that is made well, but promotes a bad message. But with Kirk Cameron, you get the best of both worlds. It's a crap movie that promotes misinformation. They employ absurd scenes to drag out the runtime to justify it in theaters. But above that, it pushes the fake idea that, oh, the left is trying to ban Christmas. And I watched it with someone who was raised pretty heavily in Christianity, and they were like, nah, this movie is reading a lot of it wrong and making a ton of stuff up. So it feeds this false political narrative while feeding Christians, the main people who this movie is made for, false information about the Bible. It's pretty bad. Now for my favorite movie. Well, I already kind of answered this. My favorite movie is probably Noroi, The Curse. It scared me the most. But I'll give a runner-up. One of my other favorite movies ever is Executive Koala. Now, Executive Koala is a really weird movie. I think that it's probably more funny than it is scary, but there are a few tactics that kind of messed with my head and I had no idea what was going on with the movie. It's one of the weirdest I've seen. It has a really weird, absurd story, but that's kind of part of how it gets in your head. It's not so much of a mix where each of these elements are clearly defined, it's more of a blend where moments are funny, but could also be psychological jabs at the audience. Honestly, it might take an especially weird viewer to like it, so watch at your own risk. The next one is from Trixie, another friend of mine, and they ask, if you could choose to live in any fictional world, which one would you pick? And I don't think this is one many of my subscribers could guess. Because I mostly cover horror movies, I don't tend to delve into the realm of worlds you would want to visit. But the fictional world I would live in is Godziban. Essentially, Godziban is an internet Godzilla puppet show featuring other of Toho's most famous kaijus. And thankfully, as of just last year, got an official translation on YouTube. Most of my subscribers probably don't know this, but I love Godzilla, I love kaiju. I own every Godzilla movie on Blu-ray, and if you want to know what's been outside the camera in these videos for a long while, it's the Gamera Complete Collection. So I am head over heels for kaiju, and honestly Godzilla is one of my favorite characters ever. And Godziban is just a cute show. It's fun to see the kaijus hang out, and I really love their personalities. I love the idea of Monster Island where all these monsters hang out. And it's a really cute, fun interpretation and characterization of all these monsters. The next question they ask if I have to pick one thing about my favorite movie or game that I would change, or just a general criticism I have about it, what would it be? And I'm gonna go back to Resident Evil 2 Remake for this one. My main problem with this game is the integration of the B scenario. For those unfamiliar, if you play as Leon first, Claire will get a different story and vice versa. And in the remake, you still have to play through the B scenario or second scenario to get the true ending. And the scenarios change a little bit. But in terms of story, playing one first and the other second doesn't change much. Not only that, but there are quite a few copy-pasted segments in the B scenario. Which might sound weird, but let me explain. For example, in the original game, Claire and Leon can both extinguish the same helicopter. Although, logically, you'd think about it, if you extinguished it as the first person, why would it set on fire in the second scenario? But I can overlook that because I understand that it's just the gameplay. Resident Evil 2 Remake does that, but in the story. There's one point in the story where Ada ends up in the same incinerator that Sherry does, but somehow I guess they end up just missing each other. But that's my gripe with Resident Evil 2 Remake. And the last questions are from John Jackal, another friend of mine. First he asks, why did I start making videos? And I pretty much started because I loved Saw. But at the same time, it was also out of frustration because I was frustrated with the later sequels. And I was frustrated with how people viewed the original as just mindless gore when it was a pretty good mystery. So you could say I started out of frustration, but I'd say I started out of my love of the first Saw movie. And I also wanted to contrast a lot of the negative reviewers you see on the internet. Although ironically I have quite a few videos where I give negative reviews. But I never go out of my way to review a movie because I hate it. In fact, a lot of the movies I ended up reviewing that are negative are because I continued on with the series. And whether or not the sequel is good or bad, I have to review it because, well, I continue via the series. But really, I try to review movies I love like Pulse or Ju-on. So really, I do these to spotlight stuff I love. Speaking of stuff I love, they next ask, what's the best animation I've ever watched? And I'd say the best animated movie I've ever seen is Perfect Blue. It's a kind of psychological horror thriller anime movie. And I can't say I can think of many of those, so it's unique to that extent. And it also gets in your head. There are perfect moments of editing where it links between moments and you think, was that just in her head? Was that not? And it was also a great murder mystery. It constantly had me guessing and I was engaged in the whole film. It's also something that kind of means quite a bit to me because the main character is torn between whether they pursue an idol career or an acting career. And I kind of related because I've reviewed some animated TV shows and some fans of that want me to review more animation. But I most often review horror. So at the time, especially when I posted some animated reviews, it led to this duality, what they want and what I want to do. So I related to it on a personal level, making it my favorite animated movie. And that's it for the questions and for the video, so I thank everyone who asked anything and all of you watching any of my videos. So stay tuned for the next review and I will see you next time. Zibbo, bye bye!